Prior to 9/11, American media presented Muslims negatively. In movies, Arabs were the bad guys the heroes defeated. The Arabian world was the Orient, a backwards world inferior to Western society. In 1979, the Iranian hostage crisis heightened Americans' negative views of Muslims. Iranian rebels overthrew the U.S. Embassy and held 52 hostages for 444 days. With a 24-hour news cycle, the media constantly reported on it. The media showed Muslims as terrorists. So when the Oklahoma City bombings occurred, the media immediately implied a Muslim extremist executed the attack without any proof. It was wrong. The live coverage of 9/11 included no mention of Islam because there wasn't any information at the time to indicate who had perpetrated the attacks. Similarly, in the days immediately following the attacks, organizations and politicians vowed vengeance on those who had carried out the attacks. But there was little information of the identity of the attackers. The FBI officially released images and information on the 19 hijackers on September 27th. Studies of the months and years immediately following the attack showed that there was a drastic increase in the coverage of Muslim-based stories, whereas previously coverage was often limited to holidays or events that fit stereotypes. Coverage in the first several months after the attacks were much more comprehensive. The stories served to educate the public more about Islam and Muslims, providing a more balanced view of them that was less focused on stereotypes. Gradually, though, animosity and fear of Muslims and Islam began to grow in the years after the attack. This growth happened even as the public continued to become more informed about the people and their religion. This was believed to have been caused by uninformed people who were reported to have a neutral viewpoint of Muslims prior to the attacks, gradually developing a more negative view of Muslims. This uninformed portion of the population was said to have been heavily influenced by the media, which would indicate that the media was likely responsible for this gradual shift following the attacks and America's entrance into the Iraqi War. Almost 2 decades after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Islamophobia still remains rampant, largely due to the media and how Muslims are portrayed. In the aftermath of 9/11, Muslims have received the largest increase in news coverage relative to other minority groups. These narratives include, but are not limited to, gendered sympathies where Muslim women are pitied and in need of rescuing, or good versus bad Muslims in television shows where the character either shows an extreme amount of American patriotism or is in fact a terrorist. This concept is known as simplified complex representation. Positive representations of Arabs and Muslims have helped form a new kind of racism. But how? In essence, mainstream media tries hard to represent Muslims in a victimized or sympathetic role, which coincidentally counteracts its initial intent and instead plays into the stereotypes of Muslims. These so-called positive representations have been used to mask Islamophobia to provide that the United States is now a society where racial inequality has been eradicated. So the question remains, if positive portrayals do not in themselves solve the issue of negative representation of Muslims, what can truly be done to dismantle Islamophobia in the media?